So I've got here with me Beth Rubin of Olive Tree Escapes. She does boutique trips in Italy, a little bit more off the beaten path, so not so crowded and typical touristy destinations. And so I'm going to let her take it away.
Thanks.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so like Amanda said, we're going to look at some standard travel as well as off the beaten path travel, so you can sort of get a feel of what you can have in Italy if it's your first time, if it's your fifth time. So that's me, just so you know who you're talking to. So these are the subjects that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Rome, Florence, and Venice, which are obviously very popular destinations that can get very crowded. However, there are places and things that you can see in these destinations that won't be crowded. And also with the current situation, nothing is crowded. So actually travel in the fall of 2020 and the winter of 2021 will be amazing to visit these destinations because there will be hardly any tourists. So it's highly untouched and very interesting to see. So we're going to talk about Rome, Florence, and Venice. We're also going to talk about the Amalfi Coast. And then we're going to talk some general stuff about food and wine throughout the country. And then if you have any questions, you can ask. If you want to ask questions in the middle, that's fine too. So we'll start with Rome.
Italy.
And, you know, obviously, the photos of Rome are very iconic and they bring up feelings, you know, just looking at this picture. And look at how empty it is, which is amazing. But, you know, the Colosseum is very iconic of Rome. It's the first thing you think of when you think of Rome. So I just, you know, wanted to get you feeling the beauty of Italy. And again, with this fall and winter travel of 2020, 2021, this type of situation is what you're going to encounter. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the different things that we can do in Rome, which includes, you know, private and small group touring of all of ancient Rome, what we just saw, the Colosseum, the Vatican, the Trevi Fountain, the Pantheon. All of that stuff can be done privately. It can be done in a small group, whatever you're more comfortable with. But then there's also these off the beaten path destinations, which is kind of what we want to talk about. So again, I just wanted to share with you some ideas of things you can do and then talk while looking at it's so fascinating to see these areas completely void of crowds. So again, something to consider. But there's something like this, which most people have not seen. This is what is known as the Sancta Sanctorum. And it's very central, right in the middle of Rome, just a few steps, as they say, from the Colosseum, but a completely different world where people don't go. It's very well known in sort of the Catholic world. It's one of the most important churches to visit in Rome. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but pilgrims, as they say, go to this church and they actually climb the stairs on their knees, like all the way up. They pray on each stair and each level. It takes hours. And then when you get to the top of the stair, you're rewarded with this amazing little chapel that's frescoed and beautiful. And it's just one of those incredible off the beaten path places in Rome. I didn't take a photo of the stairway because these are pilgrims and they're praying, and that's a fine line. So I don't want to photograph things like that.
Is there a way to go past it, even if you're on a pilgrimage, but say you have bad knees, so you don't have that much time to do the praying?
There's a separate staircase.
Okay.
So it's sort of like a split. And on one side, when you're facing it, the right side is the pilgrims climbing, and on the left side is the regular people. Yeah, regular people that can climb up and get to that a little faster. Mm-hmm. Also nearby, and still in what we call ancient Rome, is the Church of San Clemente. And this is a very interesting church. It's sort of got layers. It's like a layer cake, and it's got all these different layers. And basically over time, they just built on top of it and built on top of it. And it was a Roman ruin to begin with. And then they built a church on top of it. And then they built another church. So it's very fascinating. So if you're interested in churches, that is another one. And it's never crowded, which is amazing. It's always nice to go into these places and really feel what the Romans feel and not be overcrowded with all the tourists. other places that I mentioned in the slides are places like the Baths of Caracalla. So we're talking about ancient Roman baths, which are very interesting. Again, beautiful, and nobody goes to see them. So this is a perfect type of thing to go on a private tour, and just enjoy it, and you can relax, and you're not pushed around with all the crowds. It's absolutely fabulous, and it's right next to the train station. Which is amazing. Like, Rome is a living museum, so it's something that you want to see. Obviously, if you've never been, you go to the Colosseum, you go to the Vatican, you go to the Forum, and you see those things. But I think the more interesting thing is the extra days, or the days when you go back after you've been there, and you see all the things that nobody's thinking of, which
Are
are
these tours you have to sign up for ahead of time?
yes,
Okay.
definitely, because you'll want to go with a guide, so that you know what you're looking at. I can't tell you how many times when I was a student, I went to the Colosseum. I don't know what I was looking at, and then when I went with an archaeologist, it shed so much light, and taught me so many things that never would have occurred to me, even from reading a book. So I do highly recommend traveling with a guide. Not an
If
escort.
someone wants to just do like do the typical touristy Colosseum and the typical touristy version of the Vatican, but they want to have a day to have a private guide, is that something you can do to set up for these other experiences?
Of course, absolutely. And we're very careful with our guides. We like to match them to the traveler's personality. So if you say, I've got this lady and she's got her family and the kids are, okay, so the kids, as soon as you say kids, I cut half of my guides out and I know who to focus on. Are there, the kids are really smart, they're really interested in art history, or they're really interested in archaeology. I can pair your family with an archaeologist or an art historian or a chef, or whatever it is that we're doing. I like to get as much information about you as possible, so that I can ensure that you have a great time and you walk away saying, oh my God, it felt like she was my sister.
Perfect. Okay.
So we'll go to Florence.
Oh,
Again,
nice.
iconic, lovely photo, just to sort of see an overview of the city.
And a lot of my guests, when they go to Florence, they want to go to the Uffizi Gallery, they want to see David, they want to go out to the vineyards. So it looks like you're going to talk about some of that here as well. So those are probably the main focuses for Florence. Do you have other things that you have them do?
So again, oh yes. So again, private small group tours of the highlights, the main sites. You can always get a small group tour if it's something that everybody wants to do. But once you want to go off the beaten path, that's where you want to go private. And that way, you get to see everything you want. You get to ask your questions. You don't have to listen to everybody else's questions. So that's kind of what we want to focus on. So again, there are lovely lesser known sites in the city of Florence. Things like the Pitti Palace, which is on the other side of the river. And that has amazing galleries, and all these different galleries, costume gallery, silver gallery. The painting gallery is pretty amazing. And then in the back of the palace is the Boboli Gardens, which is Italian gardens. So not, all the flowers and everything that we think of when we think of an English garden, but more manicured and topiary and things like that. And all of this is kind of happening on the other side of the river, which is what they call the Oltrarno. So it's like the left bank if you were in Paris. So highlights of the city, the Uffizi, the Duomo, the Accademia, all of that's going to be in the historical center. And then on the other side of the bridges, because there's a river that runs right down the middle of Florence, on the other side of the bridges is the Oltrarno, and that's where you're going to get the Pitti Palace, the Boboli Gardens, and all the artisan and antique shops, which are very interesting. So here's your David, and he's in the Accademia. And this is actually the Uffizi Gallery. So all the sets of windows along the side that you see, those are all the individual galleries of paintings, sculpture, etc. And then if you look forward through that arch, that's the end before you get to the river. And that's the Boboli Gardens. So you can see what I mean about it being an Italian style garden versus an English style garden. Very lovely. If you have kids, it's great. They can run around in there. If you don't have kids, it's great. You can wander, at your own pace in there, and it's really lovely. And again, just outside of that palace, all these great little boutiques, artisans still making paper, still making gold and silver jewelry, all of these things, amazing works, and reasonably priced because it's on the other side of the river. And then also that's where the antique district is. If you're interested in antiquing, that's a great place to do it.
So where would
We're
they go to, like, if they wanted to do shopping? Is that just more center, or is that on the other
It's
side of
both.
the river?
It's both. I mean, in the center, you're going to get all of your, your Gucci's, your Pradas, and all that stuff. And then some smaller boutiques as well. But the rents are so high, So some of these artisans are going to be on the other side of the river. Like I've gone and I've had like a hat commissioned, which was really cool, and all these like cool clothes that you wouldn't find here, but you wouldn't also find in Prada, So if you're a normal person, normal, and you don't want the high-end fashion boutiques, but you want something that you're not going to find in the U.S., the other side of the river is where you're going to want to go. And they have great restaurants on that side, great gelato, obviously, great gelato everywhere, but everything over on that side is just a little more local. You'll find that a lot of the shops on the historical center side of town are no longer maintained by Italians.
Mm.
So that's the thing. And I am going to talk about Chianti and Food and Wine and all that, but it's going to be nearer to the end of this. So we will go there. Don't worry. We are going to eat and we are going to drink. But I was going to say also on this side of the river, there are some really lovely churches, and there's one that's called the Brancacci Chapel, which if you are interested in art history, it's kind of where the beginning of all of modern art began. With frescoes by Masaccio and Masolino, which are fascinating. And again, it's one of those lesser known places, so there's not the lines, there's not the crowds, which is great. Then we'll go north to Venice. Right now, we've just been taking the train from Rome to Florence to Venice, and the train between each city is less than 2 hours, so it's great. A great way to travel. So Venice is very iconic, and there's nothing like it in the world. But a lot of people think that the only things that you can do in Venice are visit St. Mark's and Doge's Palace and maybe get some glass, and then that's it, and you're done Venice. So many people say, "Oh, I can do Venice in one night." Don't waste my time. Okay, that's how you do. What is it? Europe and all of Europe in 11 days or something like that. If it's Tuesday, it must be Spain. But in this case, Venice is actually worth digging into. It took me a long time to see that for myself. I went there for the first time in 1996 when I was studying abroad, and I was a little underwhelmed. It was August, it was hot, it was crowded. And, I was, a mopey college art student, so nothing was going to impress me. But I've been there probably 12 times since.
Wow.
And it's my job. And the first 7 times, it really was, it's my job. Like, I really don't want to be here. I'm not interested. But somewhere around the 8th or 9th time, it clicked. That's a long time, and I don't want any of you to have to wait 9 times visiting a place for it to click, which is why you want to come to Amanda, who can come to someone like me, who can show you the way around all of the crowds and around, all the people standing in St. Mark's Square with a pigeon on their head or on their arm. No. We don't want to hang out with the pigeons. Obviously, again, you want to see the things that you're supposed to see, which is really St. Mark's and the Doge's Palace. That's sort of the center of the city. That's the main highlight. And then there are all these islands. Venice itself is an island, but then there are these tiny islands around there. The most famous of which is Murano, and that's where they do the glass blowing. Now they sell all of the glass on Venice mainland, but if you go to the island, you'll get better deals, and you can watch it being blown. And there's a glass museum if that's something that you're interested in. And it's a nice day. It's a boat ride out, about an hour or so out, and then you have time to wander around, and it's just a nice little island. But the other islands, I think, are much more interesting, and that would be the island of Burano and the island of Torcello. Torcello has a really nice church with great mosaics, and that's like its big calling. That's what people go there for. But Burano is the lace island. So if you've heard about the ladies in Venice who make the lace, that is where it's done, is on the island of Burano. Beautifully colored houses just line a little canal, and they're all making lace, and there's great restaurants, and everyone's very friendly. And there's actually an amazing vineyard that's right there on the island of Burano. And it's an old vineyard, and they just kind of restarted it, I'd say within the last decade. I was there last April. The wines are amazing. And they've actually put in a Michelin-starred restaurant. And I can't remember exactly how many rooms, small boutique, like 4 or 5 rooms. So they have like a boutique hotel there as well. And they just run it all. The restaurant, the winery, the hotel is all right there. Really nice, totally off the beaten path. I mean, if you want to go to Venice and not be stuck with the crowds, stay on the island of Burano at a winery, and it's like a whole other world.
Sounds wonderful.
Yes.
Mm.
So again, iconic photos just to give you a taste of what Venice looks like. This is Burano. So this is the lace island.
Oh, beautiful.
So exactly, beautiful colors, and you still get the canal feel and the water, obviously, but you're like a half an hour away by boat.
And it's not too hot in mid-September?
No, not in mid-September. You know, it's hard. Italy is hard because like June, July, August get oppressively warm, but everybody's got a family and they want to go with their kids. And it's like, this is summer break time. So, you know, it's a give and a take, you know, so you want to be by water for sure in the summer, but September and October, for me, the best times to visit during the season are April, May, and September, October. So you're still getting the full flavor of everything, but it's not hot and it's not as crowded.
So where do the Venetians and the Italians go on their holiday?
Always to the sea. They all just go to the coast. It could be the Mediterranean side, it could be the Adriatic side. It depends on who they are and what they're interested in. But yeah, the month of August is like dead in Italy. So that's a good time to travel if you're up for,
the heat.
Exactly. And this is also Venice. This is the Jewish ghetto. The first Jewish ghetto was in Venice. Now, we're not talking like Holocaust days. We're talking well before that. But this was the first ghetto. There's actually 5 synagogues in this small little area. And it's fascinating. And this is part of a neighborhood called Catania, pretty much where all the Venetians live if they still live on the island of Venice. This is very local. So the shopping is very local. I mean, in this square in particular, it's going to be highly kosher, highly, Jewish focused and this and that. But the neighborhood stretches on a ways. And so that's where you're going to get your more local shopping and, again, seeing actual Venetians in Venice. And this is interesting. People love the Amalfi Coast. It's iconic. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Everybody wants to go there.
It doesn't even look real.
I know, right?
It's like a painting. Wow.
It's funny because the first time I ever went to Italy when I was a student, the study abroad program landed in Naples, and we started in Naples and worked our way up to where we were studying. And so this was the first thing I saw. I mean, I saw Naples first, like kind of dirty city that was awesome. But then like the first day they took us to Pompeii and they took us to the Amalfi Coast. And it was like, what is this? For a girl coming from Chicago, it's like, I've never seen anything like this. And when you go there, that's exactly the reaction you have. Like, what in the world is this?
Wow.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
So some things to do in that area. Again, the private and small group tours where you can go by boat. So you can go to the island of Capri, which is obviously very popular and not quite as popular, but really just as nice, if not nicer, is to just take a boat along the coast itself. Seeing it from the water is completely different than seeing it by car. And it's a lot more comfortable. The Amalfi Coast by car is a very twisty, turny road. So you have to be prepared for that. So seeing it by boat is nice because then you can stop, obviously you can jump off the boat and swim. There's lots of grottos. I know everyone knows about the Blue Grotto on Capri, but there are many grottos along the coast as well. And the Emerald Grotto is lovely. So, the boat can pull in and you can do that. And then there's all these great little towns that you can visit along the way where there's restaurants that you can't reach unless you come by boat. So it definitely limits the tourists, and it gives you sort of a special experience that you can't have anywhere else. And again, the idea of going by car and driver is also very nice, as long as you're prepared mentally for the twisting and turning.
Gotta get sick.
Yeah, I wear C-bands, like
Yeah.
they put in the pressure points, and it's very helpful.
Good.
And then you can see all these beautiful towns, Amalfi, Ravello, all these great places that obviously Positano, which was the first slide, is iconic, and it's what we think of when we think of the Amalfi Coast, but there are these other small towns too. And Sorrento is on the other side of the peninsula, and you can visit that. And of course, from there, you can visit Pompeii and Herculaneum and Naples. So this is from the boat on the way to Capri. And this is Pompeii. So it's great to have a guide and wander through. And you can, again, this should come up later, but Pompeii is really great paired with a vineyard. There's a lot of really nice boutique vineyards right on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, which is still an active volcano. So the wine is very different from what you taste when you think of Chianti or Brunello or anything like that, because it's got volcanic soil, and you can really taste that. I mean, you don't taste a volcano in your mouth, but you can taste the difference. And the visit to the wineries is really interesting, because you have this incredible view of Mount Vesuvius and beautiful vineyard and all of that. And then a lot of times they'll pair it with a wine pairing lunch that's nice, and you can try all the different types of wine that they make, from sparkling to white to red, and you're sitting there right looking at this that destroyed the world in 79 AD. And that's Herculaneum. So a lot of people think, they know about Pompeii, but the other town that was really destroyed is this town called Herculaneum. And you can see, or at least I can see, and I can tell you that it's much better preserved than Pompeii. Pompeii is iconic. That's the one everyone thinks of, but Herculaneum is much better preserved. So I like to do them both in one day if you can.
How close are they?
What's that?
How close are they?
Very. Yeah. I mean, they're within a half an hour.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it's hard when you do it in a time aggressively hot. So you want to go early in the morning, you'll probably just do one. I know it's a bucket list to hit Pompeii, but I think it's more interesting to hit Herculaneum.
Is there just better buildings in Herculaneum and better remains, or
they've done better remains, better archaeological work, which is not to say that Pompeii's not catching up. I was there in October, and I was pretty impressed with what they had done recently. That's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And they were having some problems because it was kind of, I don't want to say it was falling into disrepair, but it was not being kept up as well as it could have, and they seem to be catching up with that. So Pompeii is getting much better than it was in the last few years, and they've opened up a few sites that they've dug out. So it's absolutely worth visiting. But I think that we shouldn't ignore Herculaneum.
Gotcha.
And this is Naples, which I love. It's the first place I ever went to in Italy, so it holds a place in my heart. And lots of people think of Naples, they think of a dirty city, or they think of mafia and things like that, but they're really trying to get out from under that. They've done a lot of work, anti-mafia work, which is good. The things that you see in this city are amazing. And as much as of a big city as it is, it's still very untouched by tourism. Certainly not tourism of the US. It's just not something that we push here, but it is amazing. And they've got beautiful churches, beautiful galleries, amazing little streets like this. This is in the area where they sell nativity scenes year round. The whole street is all the way down. It's a very long street. You can't tell, but it's all different people with selling nativity scenes. It's incredible.
Oh, nice.
It is very nice. And of course, pizza. Pizza came from Naples, so if there's no other reason to go for the pizza.
Have an original pizza.
Speaking of which, let's talk about some wine. I wanted to show you this because this is what I think of when I think of food and wine in Italy, but it's not what the average person thinks of. This is the region called Piemonte. So that's up in the northwest. Turin is the capital, and that dome that you see on the left is actually in Turin, in the city center. So you can see the vineyards are so close that you can touch the city center from there. That's where they had the Winter Olympics in 2006.
And Teresa, this is where they also have a very famous automotive museum, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Maserati?
No, Fiat.
Oh.
Yeah. The Fiat comes from Turin.
Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha.
Okay. I was like, which? No, my head was spinning, but yeah.
I think Turin also is a city that needs to be more visited. It doesn't have any of that like dirty or mafia type background that Naples does. This is actually much more beautiful, more clean, almost French, because it is so close to the French border. It has a lot of French influences, so the things that you see there are completely different than south of that area. But the reason I keep going back to this place is the food and wine, which I think is the best in all of Italy. I think it's the best in all of the world. And for me, it's absolutely the best in all of Italy. This is where you get your Barolo, your Barbaresco, your Barbera, your Asti. This is where you get your chocolate. This is where you get some of the best cheese. And this is where you get, what's that?
The nougat is made there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And the nocciola, the hazelnut chocolate is there. And my favorite thing, the truffle. And I'm not talking about chocolate, although they make chocolate truffles. The mushroom truffle is in this area. So it's really like we've got everything right here, and they've got art, and they've got history. This is where the shroud is, if that's of interest. The Shroud of Turin is obviously in Turin, and the countryside outside has, you know, all this beautiful vineyards. So things to do regarding food and wine. And I've kind of split this into a couple of different things. So again, private and small group tours in the major cities. You can only get small group tours in the major cities, as I had mentioned before, just because of, you know, finding people that would be interested at the same time as you are. So food tours are really interesting. They're usually, I try to keep them either, again, private or small, max of 8, maybe 12. Evening strolls or morning strolls, you know, through a section of the city that is a little off the beaten path. Like in Rome, we have a great small group tour that goes through Trastevere. So that's on the other side of the river in Rome. So a little more off the beaten path. It's like the artists' quarters. And they have amazing food and wine over there. So you have like 10 stops, you know, you start at 6 p.m. and you end at 10 o'clock at night, and you've tried pasta, different wines, different types of pasta, and then you end with gelato, which again is always great. And then, you know, sorry, go ahead.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. And then in Florence, you know, similar type of thing. And in the morning you would, you know, visit a sandwich shop, do the coffee, because obviously the cafe culture in Italy is like no other. So you want to stop and try the coffee and, you know, stand at the counter like the Italians do and live la dolce vita. And, you know, the same goes with Milan and Lake Como and things like that. But then, you know, you get to your private tours where you get to visit the wineries outside of town, which is what Amanda had touched on earlier when we were in Florence. Places like Chianti, Brunello. And from Venice, there's some very famous wines outside of Venice. Again, so you could spend more time in Venice. Valpolicella, Amarone, Prosecco is all from that area outside of Venice.
And Beth, are there any of these food tours where you actually get to help with the cooking yourself?
They've actually have scheduled one for someone just around lemons. So I've done a little bit more unusual food tours with Beth's group than the typical kind of make us pasta or pizza, and
Right.
it's just not maybe as better than our local would be.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. There's a great one just outside of Sorrento, where you go into this private lemon grove and then you meet with the mama who doesn't speak English. And that's why you have your guide with you. And she will make limoncello right there for you and
Yeah.
also teach you how to make fresh mozzarella, which is amazing.
Nice.
Fresh
Ah.
cheese is like no other cheese.
Oh man.
And there are others along that way. So if there's a particular thing that you want to learn to make, we can certainly figure that out. So
Mhm.
you have that. So it's not just the typical
Neat.
spaghetti, pasta.
Exactly. 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 You know, you can learn to make pizza in Rome with a real oven. You can learn to make desserts. You can learn to make tiramisu, you know, creme brulee, things like that. It's really just a matter of what you're interested in. Everything can always be customized to you.
Okay.
So this is what they would call a delicatessen in Rome, which is kind of cool. And you can see there's the cheese section, and we're blocking, you know, the meats and all that stuff. So the stores in Italy are different than the ones here. I mean, there are like the great big grocery stores that are outside of the cities, but generally speaking, the shops are more precise for a specific thing, a cheese shop, a fruit store, a wine store. So you go to all these different stores to get your things, but then you're getting the best of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So going on the food tours, nice, cute, charming gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And then to what we were talking about. So we also, we've done some great things for you with cooking lessons in private homes, which I really like this. So there's a couple in particular that I'm thinking of, but there are plenty of them throughout the country. But I've got a friend down in Positano, so that's perfect. And he was a Michelin-starred chef when he was living in England, and now he's back home in Positano where he grew up. And he's got his own private villa in town, right in the center of town, and he does cooking lessons every evening. And I've spent a lot of time with him, and it's like 3 to 4 hours. You get there at 6, you start drinking your wine, and he really heavily pairs the wine and the food. So you spend some time, he's got a cellar. So he takes you down to the cellar and you tell him, you know, what kind of wines you like. Oh, I like white. Oh, I like red. Oh, I like bold. Oh, I like sweet. And then he pulls bottles so that you get your own bottle to drink from, and you get to try what the other people have asked for. And then you try new wines and you don't feel bad if you don't like it, and you open a bottle. And then you spend the evening making all these different things. You know, in the summer, there'll be lots of cold dishes. Tuna tartare, things like that. But then there'll always be some sort of pasta, so you can try that, and a meat or a fish, and the vegetarian options abound. So it's really nice, and it's very inclusive for any kind of eating style. But the most important thing is that everything is farm to table, what they call 0 kilometer in Italy. So you're never going too far from your home to get these ingredients, which make them, when you taste it, it's like nothing. You know, you come here and you're like, oh, everything's, you know, fried in butter. But when you get there, it's not at all, which is nice.
Yes.
And then I also have a similar but not similar situation in Florence, where it's more like going into mama's house, you know, and she's very sweet. Yeah, she's 50, 60-year-old lady, and she takes you to the market and you do the whole market walk. So you get to learn about how to pick your produce and all that stuff. And then you get to pick whatever you want. And then you go back to her apartment and you cook everything together and then sit and eat and drink, which who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, no kidding.
And again, so we talked about wine, and then we talked about the truffle hunting. So truffle hunting can be done throughout the country if it's something that you're interested in. The white truffle that I was talking about in Piemonte is very specific, and it only happens at a certain time of year and under certain conditions. So you can only get the white truffle between October and end of November. They're very precious. They're very expensive. So that's something that can only be done in the fall. But then throughout the year, you can also get the black truffle, and you can get that throughout the country. You can get that in Umbria. You can still get that in Piemonte. You can get it in Tuscany. So you can truffle hunt throughout the year, and that's fun if you're a foodie And it's fun if you have kids because the kids enjoy going out with the dogs. Different vineyards. And that's what a white truffle looks like. And that's the dog.
Good.
And that kind of covers it for now.
Oh.
Teresa, do
Those
you
are
have any questions?
I kind of asked him as we were going along. I think they will probably, since we'll be going with, you know, 2 other couples, more than likely want a combination of tours and on our own. I think, oh, I plan on it. But it probably is one of those things that'll take you a couple trips at least,
It's
if not
amazing.
more.
It's one of the places that people go back to no matter what. There's so many different things. There's 20 regions and every region is different, and there's always a reason to go back.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Well, perfect.
Thank you
Well,
for your pictures.
yeah, it's a beautiful, a lot of inspiration here, Beth. I appreciate your time, and I thank you guys for joining me this evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks.